Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Tomcat Stitchery. I'm Whitney, and I'm here with a little bit of different kind of content-ish for you today. Today, we are going to be using the Lutterloh system, which is a pattern drafting kind of system to create my pattern that I'm going to be using for my Precious Fabrics Challenge entry. Today's video is sponsored today by Lutterloh, so thank you for giving me, well, I've had the system for a while. My mom got it for me for Christmas a couple years ago, hadn't had a chance to use it. They reached out, asked if I would like to do work with them a little bit, maybe show my viewers how their system worked, and I thought this is a perfect time for me to dig into the system I already have, take a look, and see what I think about things. And as a reminder, so thank you Lutterloh for sponsoring today's video, but as a reminder, I use the Lutterloh system to draft the two patterns that you can see here for my hemp outfit a couple weeks ago now, the hemp fabric outfit, top and bottom. So today we are going to be, I'm going to show you how the system works a little bit, and so that I can make up my muslin of this in my rayon, and then I will be making a final after I've done some tweaks to the pattern, if I need any tweaks done, in this beautiful Italian silk for my final dress. And as a reminder, this is the pattern that I will be drafting. And just as the green version, the green dress here, just as a kind of a explanation of what Lutterloh is. Lutterloh is a company, and it's been around since the 30s. Frank that I've been working with, it's his grandmother that started this back in the 30s. It's a really, if you're into math, you're going to absolutely love the system. So it follows the golden rule, which are kind of artistic and mathematical of the way the human body is put together. But basically it allows you to create a pattern that is your particular size. Very few of us are the same size on top as we are on bottom. You know, there can be some slight deviations, and there's a special tape measure here that I'm going to show you how to use it real quick, that helps you take these patterns that are itty bitty on the back of each of these pattern sheets and turns them into patterns that are going to fit you. Now, in this system, they do recommend, once you've drafted your patterns, kind of doing a tissue fitting on yourself before you cut into your fabric, which is fine. You can absolutely do that. I'm drafting all of this onto kind of tissue weight paper, medical exam paper, but I actually am just going to go ahead and cut. I like to see the way the fabric works, so which is why I'm making a wearable muslin and inexpensive fabric first to see what kind of fit adjustments that I need to make. However, I did make sure, because this system uses your bust and hip measurements, I did make sure that the pattern has enough room for my waist, because my waist often puts me into a larger size than my bust and hips, but there's enough ease in this dress that I've got plenty of room for my waist, so I didn't have to do anything to the waist. If I had needed to, you know, give myself a little bit more room, or if you're the opposite, if you have a smaller waist comparison to your hips and bust, you may want to go ahead and take things in, although obviously taking things in once something's been made up is much easier than letting it out. Okay, so let's really quickly go over to the cutting table, and I want to show you what's included with the system. All right, let's really quickly take a look at what's included in the Lutterloh system, just so you know what I'm working with here. So this is the box, and this is what you pull out of it. Anyway, in this little notebook, you do get the special tape measure. This is what I was using to take my measurements of my bust and hips, a pen, some push pins, and then tape. I just use my own tape. You're also going to need paper, scissors. I've got tracing paper that's already down here on the table. You're going to want some of that. And then you are going to need some rulers. Lutterloh does sell their little ruler pack, which is like a hip curve and a French curve, basically. And then it's also got, like, you know, if you're marking buttons and stuff, like different size buttons and that kind of thing. I'm assuming this is for buttonholes. Anyway, it's got some other stuff on it. But a regular French curve or curved ruler and a hip curve would work just fine as well. Also a straight, this has the straight edge on it. So anyway, they do sell those, but you could also just use what you've got in your own space, your own sewing space. So that is what is kind of the tools that are included. Now on the inside here with the book, and I'll be going over this as we do mine. Like I said, we're just taking our full bust measurement and our hip measurement to get our numbers. And then we'll be going through the rest of these steps on how to actually, I'll show you how I actually draft it here in just a second. And then it's got a whole bunch of instructions. This is an important page. This is the symbols page. So this is published in, I think it says 14 languages. So they use symbols to identify like what the pieces are, if it's cut on the fold, straight of grain, that kind of thing. The V equals the front of the sleeve, that sort of stuff. Also down here, it's got some, like this little diagram here means that it's meant for knitted or stretched fabric. This is a maternity pattern, if you want to do contrasting colors, that kind of thing. And then it does have a little section of some sewing like tips and how to do some certain things. Although, again, this isn't really beginner friendly pattern system, only because you just need to know how to do some of the techniques because there aren't any sewing instructions. And then beyond that, these are all of the patterns. So as you can see, a ton of these come with the system, like a ton. Men, women, not as many men and kids, most of it's women, but yeah, you get a ton of patterns in the system. And then there's supplemental patterns that you can buy for different, like the 2024 fall or 2024 winter or whatever going forward. So they do have more. So let's take a look at what what the pattern sheet looks like. And I've already pulled mine out. So this is the pattern I'm going to be making. And I'm going to be doing this green dress that's right here. And as you can see, it gives me the number 132, and VV means dress. And then it gives me approximately how much fabric I'm going to need. So 150 centimeters, which is like, 54-inch wide fabric, which I've got. And then I need 190 centimeters, which is like 1.9 meters. So about, 2 yards is, especially if I shorten anything, a little over 2 yards. Anyway, that's what those numbers mean. Then when we flip it to the back, we have our pattern pieces. So these are the pieces for pattern 132, which is what I'm doing. This is 132 right here. So I'll be tracing off the front. A means front, B means back, and it even says 132 on here. So I know that that's the dress, the pattern pieces to use to get that dress. And then the sleeve, they share the sleeve. And then this EF, I think it's sleeve and cuff. So is what that means. EF. Oh, see, I've got to already check my symbols here, which is an important page to have open, I feel like. Okay, so E is sleeve and F is cuff. So this must be means sleeve cuff, which I can tell that that's that. Our diagonal lines here indicate facing. So we'll have to draft the facing. So you'll want basically these will be 4 pieces. So you'll have the regular piece and then the facing of each cuff, but you do it times 2 so that you have 2 cuffs. So that's what that means. You can see the little buttons and buttonholes. Maybe I can see them, but they're kind of small. On either side of these, that we can just kind of wing as we go. And then here on the sleeve, you see that little V. This is the front of the sleeve. There's no notches on this pattern, so we can draw in some notches, and I probably will just so I don't get confused when we're sewing things up. But that is kind of where we're going. This also is using a zipper here at the side, and I can tell because this is the picture for zipper. I'm not going to be putting a side zipper in here because it also has a keyhole back, which is indicated here. So I don't know why you would need a keyhole back and a side zipper. I can usually get my stuff on just fine without a side zipper. So that's, but it does have sleeves. I don't know. I may just end up doing just a full zipper up the back and calling it good and not worrying about it. I hate side zippers. Anyway, this little squiggly line here means to gather that in. I've got the little dash up here that says 7 centimeters, which is going to be where I cut in to put my continuous placket for my cuff. So, and then these dotted lines here on the outside edge mean cut on the fold. And then this is the waistline. This little dotted line here and here are the waistline. So I will be using my bust measurement for all of the lines at the waist. So this number 21 at the waist and above. And then for any of these below the waistline, I will be using my hip measurement. So that is how that works. Okay. Okay, I think that's kind of it. So let me, I've got, like I said, some tracing paper taped together. So let's, I'll show you how the whole system works now, how you draft your patterns. Okay, so there you have it. That is everything that comes with the system. I mean, there are so many, I don't even know how many patterns, I don't even know, so many patterns, maybe 200 that just come with the system. And then they've got the supplemental little patterns that you can buy each season if that's something that you're interested in. So this is the tape measure, and I'll show you up close. This is the part here that we'll be using here in a little bit to do the drafting. But if we turn this over, there's also, this is all in centimeters, which I actually find helpful because my brain doesn't put my numbers into centimeters quickly. So these are kind of a little bit more arbitrary numbers to my brain when I'm measuring things out. But if we turn it over so that this white part here is actually the back of it, this allows us to measure ourselves really easily. So we're going to take just 2 measurements. We're going to take our bust measurement. So when we turn the tape measure over, it just allows us to work at the other end of the tape measure at the fullest point of your bust. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to have to do a full bust adjustment or not, but that's why we're making this. We're going to find out while I'm doing my little wearable muslin, but we're going right at the fullest part of your apex. You want your tape measure to be parallel to the floor. I'm taking that, showing you how to do this, and I obviously have clothes on. I have my dress on, but when I was taking these for my actual measurements, I did do this just in my underwear. I'm just not going to do that on the internet. Anyway, I get 114 centimeters for my full bust measurement. So I need to make note of that. 114 is my bust measurement. So when I'm drafting my patterns, any of the spots, and this will make better sense when we get to the actual showing you how this works, anything from the waist up, I'm using this 114 centimeter mark. And then we take down to the full hip, which often, I mean, sometimes isn't necessarily your fullest part. So this measurement's going to be anywhere between 7 and 9 inches below your belly button, depending on how long your rise is. So around there, find kind of the fullest point that's in that area. So for instance, if you carry a lot of weight in your upper thigh, if that is your largest measurement, that's not where we're taking this number. We're taking this number kind of at the fullest part of our rear end, right here. Again, about 7 to 9 inches below our natural waist, which is sometimes around our belly buttons. That can vary as well, but somewhere around there. And when I put this here, I get 110 centimeters. So that is the hip measurement that I'm going to be using. So anything that's drafted below the waist, I use the 110 marker. Now, both of my measurements happen to be even numbers. If yours is an odd number, the instructions are going to tell you to round up to the nearest even number. So if I were at 109, I would want to choose 110 because the markings on this white part are just in even increments. So that is something to be aware of as well. So now let's go over back to the cutting table, and we're going to draft my Precious Fabric Challenge dress. Okay, before we get started with drafting my dress, I want to talk a little bit real quickly. There's like a little brochure that's in the front of your book. It's like in the front part here, just like sticks right there in the front. And one thing that's like a good little tip to have is this vest here that's on the front. There's actually the pattern pieces basically for that are in the instructions. So it's this piece and this piece. You'll do it the same way as we'll be doing this pattern here. But this is a really good way just to check to see what kind of fit adjustments you may need to make to all of their patterns. So maybe you make this up and you are able to determine, okay, I need a forward shoulder on all their patterns. It's a good sloper pattern, I guess, to say. Then there's also this little look here, this shorts and shirt that has the patterns for that on the back too. So just make sure that you don't miss that. You draft those out the same way that you do all of the other patterns, the way we're going to do this one. All right. So as I just wanted to throw that out there. So as I mentioned before, my measurements, and we're only taking the hip and the bust. Waist is important because I am going to measure the waist of the pattern pieces just to see if I need to add any. In my case, add any, but it might also be that you need to take in yours a little bit. Obviously, taking in the waist is much easier once the garment's been made up. I just need to make sure I have enough room for my waist because my waist tends to be a bit fuller than what than the golden ratio, I guess. Okay, so I've got my pattern. Again, I'm making pattern 132, which is this front and back pattern pieces right here. The sleeve gets shared with the pattern 131, which is this one. So I will be basically drafting this front, the back, the sleeve, and the cuff. So I'm going to, on camera, show you how we're going to draft the front. The back is done the same way, so you can figure that out. And I'm also going to go ahead and draft the sleeve on here as well for you guys. And then I'll show you all the finished pattern pieces at the end. So the first thing that we need to do is we want to place our paper here somewhere on I've got my tracing paper. I've actually taped two widths together. So I'm not really sure where things are going to pop up once I start going. So I'm just kind of arbitrarily, if you look at the crosshatch on this front, it's up here at the top of the pattern. So I'm just going to assume this should be good and give me some wiggle room up here to the top and still have enough here for the hem. So what we're going to do first is very gently, we're going to tape this down. Now, Scotch tape makes, I think it's the purple Scotch tape that comes up and down like real easy. I'm just barely putting that on there because I want this to be, I don't want to rip my pattern paper, but I also don't want to rip the tracing paper below. So I want to be able to pull that up somewhat easily when we're finished. Okay, and we're going to have to pick this up and tape it down quite a few times. In fact, each time that we do a pattern piece. So that is step one. Step two is we're going to find on this scale part of this special ruler. Now, if you recall, my measurements for my bust, so we're going to do the upper part of the, above the waist first. So my bust is 114 centimeters. So if you look at this scale, you can see the 114 is a red number. There's no difference between the red and black. It just makes it easier to see. So I'm going to put my push pin, which is right here, into that 114 slot because that's my bust. Now, if my bust were 113, let's say, the instructions tell you to bump up. So if you're an odd number, go up. But I'm 114 and 110, so that makes it easy for me. Okay, so I put it right there in that 114 hole there in this special tape measure. Okay, next, and we flipped it. This is the opposite side from when we did our measurements beforehand. Okay, so once we have our push pin through that hole, we're going to now take the push pin and we're going to go right into the center of the cross right there on this pattern piece. And again, this is the front. And I am doing this on a self-healing cutting mat, which makes it really easy for me to stick this push pin in, and I'll be able to rotate it pretty well. But I'm also going to hang on to it so that it doesn't pull out. But because this is taped down, if it does pull out, it's not a big deal to put it back in. All right, and I'm also going to use the pen that came with the set just because it'll be easy for you guys to see. All right, so I am going to start, if I can kind of move this out of the way a little bit. I'm going to start here at the waist because remember, waist measurements and above, we're using our bust measurement. And then I'm going to, for the rest of the dress, I'm going to switch to my hip measurement, which is 110, to do these last couple of measurements. So anything below the waist, we do with our hip measurement. So now I'm just going to start here then. So this first dot that's right here, it says 20 right at that line. So I'm lining up the edge of my tape measure here, smoothing it out. And that number right there says 20. So I'm going to come over here and I'm on this side of the tape measure, the same side that my push pin is on. That's important because that could throw it off a little bit. And I'm just going to put a dot here at 20. So the 20 is sitting on the 20 line. Okay. So there's my dot at 20. Now I'm going to come over here and make sure that that's lined right up with that line. And the next one is a 12. So now I'm going to put 12, and that's actually part of my dart. And then I'm going to come over here to this line, which is also the 12. And you want to keep this all nice and taut. So marking 12 there. Now my next line here is a 12. I'm always staying on the same side of the tape measure that my push pin is on. And then we're going to line this up with 9.5. So here is my 9 line. Here is my 0.5 line. And then, okay, this one's a little different. I've got a point that's here on the pattern, but the line is out here because I think it was just too close. So I'm lining this up with the 13 line. And I'm going to put it there. And then 26. Ooh, barely got it all there. 26, which is the shoulder point. And then 29.5. Oh, barely got that on there. Is the other point of the shoulder point. So it's right there. And then I've got a dot here that doesn't have anything, but I can see the 26 up here. So I'm just going to move it over to the 26 because they're all just really close together. So moving that over to the 26, make a dot. This is all the neckline. Then we are at 22.5. And then 21.5. And then 23.5. Okay. And there, and that, this 23.5 here is the center point right here at center front. Okay. So now we've got from the waist up. Now this dot that's right here, if you recall, is the waist. So there will be a line that will go across perpendicular to the grain, and the grain's going to be the fold line because this is on the fold. Okay, so now I'm going to pick this up, and we're going to go to 110. Put it back in here. And now we're going to come down here. And this is 87.5. I may, ooh, that is going to go way off my paper. That is unfortunate. Okay, I'm going to have to add some paper. But to get to, and I'm out of range here. But I'm going to do 87.5 on that line. And then I'm going to come here to this line and do my 87. So let me add paper, and that is how I'm going to get my full. Again, I don't think I can get all of this into with my camera anyway. So trust me that they're there. I am going to pause for a minute and put that down so I do have my full pattern piece, but then we're going to connect the dots here in just a second. All right, so I've added some more paper and I've got all of my dots now marked. Okay, so now what we can do is put my cap back on here just a second. I'm going to move all of this. And now we're going to connect our dots. So now I'm very carefully going to lift this up. And set this aside. Oh, I don't want to rip the paper. Well, that's what I was trying to avoid, ripping the paper. But I did rip the paper a little bit. Okay. So now we're going to move this. And now we're going to connect all of our dots. So I'm going to use the Lutterloh rulers, but you absolutely don't have to. And I'm going to put this up here just for reference, just so we're making sure that we are getting what we want to get. So I'm just going to connect a couple of these. Okay. And I'm going to leave these 2 points here. are my darts. I'm actually going to leave those open because we're going to true up the pattern to get, you know, the little triangle that kind of comes out there, because there will be that. Okay. But we get that better by folding those. And oh, and I need to mark. This was also the end of my dart here. I can see the hole where my pen was. So I'm going to mark in my dart legs. Okay. Now we're going to do the armhole, which this almost always has to be done in some passes. And without totally smooth that out a little bit. There, that looks better. And I can hit that neckline almost perfectly. And then for the center, I'm going to get a yardstick, actually. Let me grab a yardstick because I'm going to need it to make my straight long lines here. All right, so now I'm going to connect these points. I know that I'm going off camera here. I apologize. And then center front is... I actually have a gridded ruler basically on the paper underneath here, so that actually really helps. All right. Okay, so here is my front, and we're going to write front on here. This is fold, cut on the fold here. I've got my dart legs open, and we will be truing those here in a second. Now, one thing that I do want to do is I do want to make sleeve. They don't have sleeve notches on here, and that is important to me. So the way that we are going to do that is I'm going to take a soft tape measure, just a regular one. And I am going to measure, on the front of the sleeve, I'm going to measure up 4 inches. I'm just going to stand it along here, because we don't have seam allowances on this yet, remember. And I'm going to mark 4 inches right there. So there's my front. And then on the back, I'm going to do that, but I'm going to mark it at 3 and 3 1/4 for a double notch. And then I'll show you when we get to the sleeve how I'm going to mark the sleeve so that those match up properly. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we need to do is add seam allowances. So obviously we don't need a seam allowance here on center front, but we do everywhere else. Also, this pattern wants us to draft a facing, which I've gone back and forth on if I want to do a facing or if I just want to finish the neck line off with bias binding, because I was going to fully line the dress, but now I'm kind of thinking I'm not going to do that. That I would rather, well, I'm not sure that my final one's going to be a dress or a top. I want to make this, I mean, that's the whole point of my wearable muslin, to make that determining factor. And I am going to put a center zipper in my wearable muslin, center back zipper. The pattern here is recommending I do a side zipper. Based on this, I hate side zippers. So I'm going to do my zipper. If I do a zipper, well, it'll be on the back piece. But I will need to add a seam allowance at center back if I do a zipper on the back pattern piece, which I think I might. So but I'm hoping that after I make my muslin, that I'm going to be able to eliminate it completely and just do a keyhole back for the final in my fancy silk. I'm just worried my fancy silk is so drapey that I'm trying to think of ways to not mess that up. And I don't want a facing on it because I think that's going to mess it up a little bit. And I'm also wondering if putting lining there is also going to weigh it down unnecessarily because I want that drape. So anyway, I think I'm going to skip drafting the facing for the neckline and just finish that off with bias binding. We're going to try all this out on the muslin, and I'll let you know what I decide after we make the muslin. But I think that's where I'm going to go with this one. So now we need to add in our seam allowances. I've decided to put in a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance into my pattern because with my final one in the silk, I want to be able to do French seams. So that is why I'm doing that. So basically, I'm now just going to go around the entire pattern and I'm going to draw in my seam allowances. I've got a clear gridded ruler. Again, I'm going to get after because we will fill that in here in just a second. Okay, so now that my seam allowances are added here, I'm going to true up this dart and I'm going to move my notch up to the cut line. Okay, so now we can cut this out, and I'm going to leave a big section here. I'm using a rotary cutter, but this is a paper rotary cutter. I have a paper rotary cutter and a fabric rotary cutter. So now I'm just going to cut along those seam allowances. All right, so now to true up my dart here at the side, I've got a perforated tracing wheel, and I'm just gonna draw in my dart legs here. And then I'm gonna fold it like it would be sewn. Like that. And then it's just a matter of cutting along that side seam. And now we've got our dart legs here. So now we can extend those up into the seam allowance so that when we're cutting it out, we can clip into our, just like so. Okay. So the front is all ready to go. I'm going to draft the back the same way, and I will come back here to do the sleeve just so we can do that, and then I'll come back to show you all the pieces. Okay, so I think I've discovered if I use pattern weights instead of taping down these paper and just being very careful, it works a little bit better for me. But again, that's completely up to you. Technically, you should tape them down just so there's absolutely no chance of these shifting because that will obviously mess everything up. But I'm finding that this is working. I also have my paper, you can see, weighted down with pattern weights too, so that nothing moves. Okay. Also, use a pencil when you're doing this. I am making such a mess with this pen, but you guys need to be able to see what I'm doing. All right, so I've got my front, back, and my cuff drafted. Now it's time to draft my sleeve. I am going to be drafting this one at 114, which is my bust measurement. So I've got my push pin through the 114, and then I'm sticking it right in the crosshairs of that sleeve pattern and pressing it down really good. Okay. And the reason I picked the 114 is because the upper part of our bodice is drafted for your bust measurement. So you're going to want to, for your sleeve, you're going to want to pick your bust measurement. All right, now we're just going to go around the horn here. Now, as I don't want this to be underneath my tape measure, so I am going to move those as I kind of go around very carefully. But we want to make sure that our tape measure is nice and flat. nice and flat, and that we are right on the line there. And then I've got to mark at 22. I roughly went around this to make sure that it would fit on this piece of paper. I think we're good. All right, next is 16. And then 14. 15.5. Sorry, make sure this line is spot on here. 16. 16. 15. And then I've got a dot here that doesn't have the number by it. So I'm going off of the line here where it says 17. I go over the dot there, but that's okay. You want it to measure up with the line. Okay, so I've added paper to both sides, and I think we've got everything all mapped out here with our dots. I actually covered up one dot here. Just need to... Okay, so now it is time to connect our dots. But before we do that, I'm going to take this off. I have noticed, especially when you get into the longer measurements, so like this was 48 centimeters down, you've got to make sure that that is nice and flat, because that can skew so easily the longer your numbers get. So like when I was going from the waist to the hem of the skirt, that can skew really easily if you're not right on the little angle of the line, and you want to make sure you're pulling it nice and taut. I mean, you don't want to pull it so hard that you pull your pin out, but you do want it to be pulled nice and hard. Okay, the other thing that I noticed, so I will bring up my other pattern pieces here in a second, but the importance of making sure that your like side seams and stuff are true. So that what that means is that they match up. And I'll show you what I mean. I had to mess around with the side seam of the back just so, because it was a little bit longer, like, I don't know, maybe a half of an inch longer than the front. So I moved the side seam up on that from the bottom just a little bit. And I had to do that on the cuff as well. And I'll show you how I did that here in just a second. So what I'm going to do is I'm only going to draw in one side of the sleeve and start to put in my hem. And then I'm going to draw the whole cap of the sleeve in, because the cap is different from front to back. But when it comes to my side seams, I am going to, I'll show you what we're going to do. So I'm just going to, and actually I'm going to freehand this. This is my preference as opposed to using one of the rulers. And I do this even when I am drafting from scratch. You can use the rulers if you want to connect your dots. All right, and I'm just going to make a few notations here. I'm going to mark this top dot that we did is the top of the sleeve cap, so I want to mark that. That'll match up with my shoulder seams. And then remember when, if we look at our pattern here, we can see V means front. So this is the front of our sleeve. And remember, we measured in 4 inches and did our notch on the front of our bodice. Well, we want to do that on this as well. So when you're here at the under part of the sleeve cap, it should match, you know, inch for inch. You don't get into ease until you start to get into the top curve here of the sleeve cap. So I'm just going to measure this in to 4, and I'm going to mark my single notch there. And then on the back, I did the same thing, but I marked it at 3 and 3 1/4. So this is at 3 and 3 1/4, and this is at 4 from that spot. Okay, now I'm going to draw in. Yardsticks are easy for these longer pieces. There's a good chance I'm going to need to lose some length in the sleeve, but I want it blousey anyway because it's a full sleeve that gets taken into that cuff. And we are going to match our lines. And then we can kind of start, because this is going to be a curved hem. Start matching these up just a little bit. Not quite that much curve. But before, I'm only going to go to the second dot here. I also want to, going to line this, my grain line up to where it is going right along my grid line here. And I'm just going to make a line. The pattern here says to go 7 centimeters up for my little placket here. I have to do math to figure out what that is. 10 centimeters is 4 inches. We're just going to say 3.5. I'm going to go up 3.5 inches. Starting at 2. So 1, 2, 3.5. So that'll be good for my placket. Okay. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take, so we're going to kind of figure up our side seam here and make sure that our hem is all well and good. Your top notch may or may not be at the center of your sleeve. That's okay. Sometimes it's not, like right dead at the center. You'll still match that up with your shoulder seam. But what I'm doing is and I can see through my paper here, but I am matching the end of the sleeve cap here and the end of the sleeve cap on this side. And I'm folding my paper over and I'm matching those 2 points. And then I'm just folding my paper in half. Like so. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is take my tracing wheel, because I want these side seams to match, and I'm just tracing along that side seam that I drew in. And I'm going to hit the hem too, so that it's uniform. It's pretty close from where I was going, but that way it's the same and I'm not using different points on the curve for it to get different. Then we're going to unfold it. And now, like I said, it was pretty much right on. We just got off a little bit right there. I'm going to draw in the rest of my hem and my side seam, or my, your underarm seam. Seam of your sleeve. Just like so. That way, everything is trued and they match. So now this whole bottom of the sleeve is going to get gathered into that cuff. This will get cut open when I put my cuff in. So the cuff will go, around that sleeve, just like, the cuff of a button-up shirt. I do want to measure this real quick because I'm a little nervous that it is going to be super duper long. And I really wanted to try and not, So before I even add or subtract anything, this is, and I don't even have the cuff on yet. This is 24.25 inches long. My finished arm length is 23.5. Now, I would like to have a little bit of extra ease because it's supposed to be a blousey sleeve. I may leave it. Because I don't want to get my sleeves too short. I may leave it for now, and I'll make a determination if I want to shorten those with the silk version, since we're doing a wearable muslin. Okay, let me add my seam allowances here, and then I'll meet you back and show you all the pieces. Okay, so let's go through all the pieces. So I've got all of my seam allowances. Again, I'm doing 5/8 of an inch seam allowance because I want to do French seams on my final. This sleeve may end up being too long, but I want that extra ease of length because I want the sleeve to be nice and billowy and kind of fall over the cuff. This may be too much, but that's why we're doing a wearable muslin. I've marked my notches in that I created on my own. I did know from the schematic, because there's a V here at this side of the sleeve, that this is the front of the sleeve. So I did know that. I marked my top of the sleeve here which was that number 17 mark there. And then I've added in my slit that's here. Again, I trued my pattern by folding it in half and making sure. I was really concerned about my sewing lines matched. And they do, and obviously my cut lines do too, because then I put in the seam allowances. Remember when you fold it over, your sleeve cap is not going to match. That it's not supposed to. The front of the sleeve looks different than the back of the sleeve on the cap, so that will not match at all. That's okay. We're just matching those two underarm points. So there is my sleeve piece. My cuff, I did the same thing. So I drafted out my points just like with the pattern here. And then I folded it in half, matching. I just matched these two top points. I mean, you could have matched the bottom points as well. And you can see I wanted the angle to be just the same. So I folded those on top of each other and then marked the angle in and then just, scribbled out the line that I didn't want. And that worked out really well. This was also when I was drafting this, realizing that you have to be super careful that neither your paper nor your pattern move. And also that, especially as you get longer, but that tape measure needs to be really flat and you need to make sure you're right on those lines. Anyway, it is now symmetrical on either side, and I will cut 4 of these, 2 cuff pieces and then 2 cuff facing pieces. And the facing pieces I will interface. So I've got that all set. And then I just made my grain line here, just right there with that fold line to make that grain line there. And then with my front and back, these also I may end up shortening, but I'm very pleased with that. I did true my shoulders. It's where you're going to sew things together. So I flipped this over, made sure that my shoulder seams matched, and they do. We're good there. And then I matched my side seams. Now, when you're matching your side seams, you do have to fold your dart bulk out of the way because your front side seam will be longer because of that dart. So once that was folded out of the way, I matched up my underarm points and walked that and ended up, like I said, I may be out of frame here. I ended up shortening the side seam, just the side seam of the back, so that it matched the side seam of the front. Now, if you were to line up my center back and center front lines, the back is longer, like quite a bit longer, but that's okay. That's excess room for the rear end, for it to go over the rear end. So that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about that. We just want to make sure those side seams match because those are going to get sewn together. So I added seam allowance to center back because I'm going to, I think I'm going to put a center back zipper into the wearable muslin, but I might, because that silk is just so lightweight and beautiful, hopefully I can get away, and I may play around with the muslin and just base the center back together before I put a zipper in to see if I can get it on and off over my head with just a keyhole opening. But either way, I will need that seam allowance to leave the keyhole opening or the zipper. So we'll leave that as is. And then I put 5/8 of an inch all the way around, including the hem. I gave myself 5/8 of an inch at the bottom for the hem because I'll do a narrow hem on both dresses. I am doing bias binding, which I probably, and I may go back. I may go back and trim just my necklines down to just 1/4 of an inch so that I can just then sew in that binding really easily. I also may, so I'm going to do like a bias facing, like a bias binding facing. So there'll be top stitching visible on the right side with my muslin, but I may, for my final with that silk, actually bind the seam allowance. So if that's the case, I'll take all the seam allowance off just the neck edge. So I'll leave it on the shoulders and everywhere else if I decide to do that. But we're going to leave it on for now for the wearable muslin. And there we have it. Those are all the 4 pieces I'll be using. Again, this is why we're doing a wearable muslin. So I'll be back next Friday and we'll have a look to see how my wearable muslin turned out and what changes I want to make. Okay, so there you have it. My pattern is all ready to go. I'm ready to cut out my muslin fabric here and make up my first dress. like I mentioned, I'm going to be doing bias binding on the neck edge, and I'm going to play around and see if I want to do a zipper in the back or just a keyhole opening. I'm hopeful I can just get it on with the keyhole, but again, it's long sleeves, so I'm not entirely sure, so we're going to play around with that a little bit. But yes, come back next Friday, and we're going to take a look at my finished muslin, and I'm going to show you areas where I want to tweak, and then I'm actually going to show you how I'm making those tweaks on the actual pattern. So I will see you guys again next Friday for that video. I'll be back on Tuesday as well. As always, leave any questions that you have down below and let me know. Have you picked a fabric for your Precious Fabric Challenge? What are you digging out of your stash to make into something special this month? All right, guys, I'll see you next time. Happy sewing!